The morning I announced my ruin, the gulls over the river sounded like laughter. I sat at the head of a long, polished table that had hosted cabinet secretaries and oil princes, and I watched a line of phones light up as if the table itself were catching fire. The statement was already out, a catastrophic liquidity event, a cascade of counterparty defaults, words I wrote with my attorney while the city slept. I had faked the fall of a man like me, and I had done it with the precision I once reserved for building empires. The goal was cruelly simple: peel away the velvet and see the bone. I wanted the truth about my wife. Arya would be awake by now. At this hour, she moved through our kitchen in bare feet and a silk robe, rehearsing the day like a ballet. She was 32 years younger and 1,000 times more luminous, and if that sentence makes you suspicious, know that I wrote it with suspicion in my mouth. Love is a coin with two faces. I had been flipping it for months. I had seen the messages that ended with ellipses. The nights she said rehearsal ran late, the new friend who knew a lot about foundations. I knew the weight of money in a room, how it hardens smiles and softens spines. I wanted to know if she loved me without it. The staff were ghosts. The chef pretended to chop herbs while listening for the news channel I had forbidden. The head of security stood a step closer than yesterday, not to protect me, but to measure the distance to the nearest exit. I stared at the river and counted the seconds until footsteps creaked overhead. The old cypress outside our window threw a lace of shade across the floor. A siren cut the morning. Somewhere, a car door slammed as if punctuation had arrived early. I'd rehearsed our conversation. I would say, "We've lost everything." I would watch what died in her eyes. She had a violinist's hands, quick and disciplined. Would they reach for me or for the phone? Would her first call be to her mother or to a realtor? I knew what a good woman would do. I just didn't know if mine was good or simply exquisite at pretending. She came in with coffee, hair unbrushed, robe tied in a knot that said she'd slept hard and dreamed harder. She set the cup in front of me and kissed my temple. "You're up early," she said, and then she saw the open laptop, the headline, the world ending in a font you could read from space. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She poured her own coffee and sat, neat as prayer, and looked at me. "Tell me everything," she said. I told her the lie I had paid to make true. The fund was gone, the ships were idle, the banks were calling, the board was bleeding. She listened with the same focus she brought to Schubert. When I finished, she reached across the table and took my hands. Her fingers were cool. "Elias," she said, "if we have a roof and each other, we're fine." It was the sentence I wanted. It was the sentence any old fool would die to hear. And yet, as she spoke, something in the air shifted. A thread drew taut, and the gulls outside went silent, as if the river itself were holding its breath. Because in her eyes, I saw love. I also saw calculation. A quick flash, then gone. The violinist counting bars before the key change. I kissed her knuckles and pretended not to notice. I told myself I would wait. I told myself I could carry the weight of my own test. The coffee cooled. The phones kept ringing. The headline marched across every screen in the city. Arya stood, moved to the window, and for the first time in our marriage, pulled the curtain fully closed. "We'll get through it," she said again, softer. Then very quietly, "There are calls I should make." I let her make them, and as the first day of my fake ruin began, I learned the oldest lesson money teaches and the last lesson pride ever allows us to accept. Once you set a trap, you cannot control what it catches. I thought I was hunting the truth. I did not yet understand that the truth was hunting me, but the worst was yet to come. I built my first fortune on steel that cut the Atlantic like a pen through paper. Freight, ports, storage, the arteries of a modern world that pretends not to need blood. Savannah made me, and I made a life here that looked like a film. A mansion with staircases that spiraled like shells, a chamber piano that had played under hands far more delicate than mine, and a garden where magnolias opened the way a deal does when everyone finally stops lying. I turned 80 last winter. The city sent cake. The governor sent wine. Iria gave me a watch that had belonged to a composer who died before radio, and when she fastened the leather around my wrist and said, "Time is a gift, not a verdict," I believed her. I met her at a restoration gala for a storm-damaged art school. She was the scandal of the night, without trying to be, because she played a piece that made men close their eyes to remember who they had been before money clotted their veins. She was not born to this world. She was born to earn every grace. The room's muttered math decided I wanted a trophy. It was an easy conclusion, but I had learned to ignore the choir and listen for the solo. When we danced, she asked about my mother. When we had dinner, she asked about my first ship. When we married in a garden full of white chairs and ruined weather, she kissed me as if the world were not watching. And if you think I was blind to what 32 years means in a mirror, understand that I drafted the prenuptial agreement myself, and she signed it without reading beyond the first paragraph. "I trust you," she said, and when I told her to have a lawyer look, she laughed. "You have enough lawyers for both of us." Years pass fast when you fold them and store them in drawers that you never open. We traveled. She started a modest foundation for young musicians without family money, and though I was its largest donor, I deliberately stayed off the masthead. I wanted it to be hers. Then the little shadows began. A message from a man named Damien that she erased too quickly. A meeting at a private club where no one plays tennis. A shift in perfume. Sleep can turn on you. You lie down and rise an older man with a younger wife and a mind that writes its own nightmares. The more I told myself not to be a fool, the louder the choir sang. I am not a jealous man by nature. Jealous men lose wars and ships. But I am a designer of tests. I trust pressure. It reveals the air pockets in a hull, the rot in a beam, the names of the friends who will sell you twice. So I hired Noah, who wears obscenely plain suits and an expression that suggests he did not get enough sunlight as a child. We built the fall like engineers build bridges, redundancies, safety nets, levers only I could pull. We moved assets into trusts with names that sounded like small towns. We gave the banks news that made them itch. We briefed the board to panic at precisely 11 in the morning. We curated a leak to a journalist who had already rehearsed the outrage. A theater of collapse with just enough smoke to look like fire. Aria was the one person I did not prepare. If you think that is monstrous, you are right. If you think I justified it, you are also right. Pride is a mutiny that wears a crown. The night before the statement, I lay awake and watched her sleep, honey hair across my pillow like the last light on the water. My mind wrote two endings. In one, she walked out with half my closets and none of my heart. In the other, she stayed, and I was the villain for doubting her. Both endings felt like losses. I chose the path that hurt slower. If you have ever been caught by a story like this, if something in you leans in when the music drops and the voice lowers, subscribe now so you do not miss the next beat, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Stories are roads. I want to know which country you are crossing this one from. The statement hit at 7. By 8, the world had an opinion. By 9, the staff were already negotiating with themselves about better futures elsewhere. Aria hugged me long enough for my chest to lose its war with my breath. Then she made her calls. To whom, I did not yet know. She said she would handle the piano school board, and she left me with the house silent as a chapel after a wedding where no rice was thrown. I spent that morning moving through rooms that had never been mine, except in name. A home belongs to the person who uses it fully. I had used it like a hotel. Aria had given it soul. Her music room was a museum of beginnings, student recital programs pinned like butterflies, photos of her in cheap black dresses that made her look like royalty without trying. On her desk, a notebook with a list that started with the dullest verbs in the language: call, cancel, sell, store, return. Discipline camouflaged as tenderness. I should have felt safe. Instead, a new word wrote itself at the bottom of my mind: replace. At noon, she came back with takeout from the Filipino place near the docks. She fed me as if hunger were a superstition. We ate, and she told me the school board would extend their season to help. She told me she had reached out to friends. She did not name any. The afternoon turned the windows into mirrors, and in them I watched a man who wanted to be loved without the costume of wealth, and yet could not take it off without making it a performance. Arya took my empty bowl, washed it, dried it, and then turned. "I need to step out," she said. "An hour." "For what?" "To ask for help," she said, and there was a brightness in her voice I had never heard. Hope or fear. I could not tell. She kissed my cheek and left by the side door. I waited 5 minutes before asking James to follow her. I told myself I was a general managing a battle he could not afford to lose. I told myself I was not a husband dragging a net through his own home to see what he might catch. I told myself stories, and while I told them, Arya's phone pinged on the counter, and for the first time in our marriage, I reached for it. What I found widened the hole I had cut in my own floor. But the worst was yet to come. There were 3 messages from the same number saved under a single letter, D. The last one read, "Bring the papers. We can make this painless." The thread had been cleaned with the discipline of a professional. Only the newest message survived. I stared at the screen like a juror handed a verdict that contains a single word, painless. There are words you never want to see in your wife's private lexicon, and that is one of them. James texted a photo. Arya stepping into a black sedan I did not recognize, wearing jeans, flats, and a jacket I had bought her in Milan. The driver was a woman with a braid and the posture of someone who had served. They drove to a building on Bay Street where I own 2 floors through companies that do not know my name. She went in. James waited. I waited for him to tell me something that would let me breathe. The call came 20 minutes later. "She's in the club," James said. He meant the Oriole, a modern labyrinth with no windows and too many members. She met a man in the corner booth, tall, early 40s. "Looks like trouble. Can you get a photo?" "Phones are bagged at the door," he said, "but I can get close enough to hear." He did. I paced the piano room until the carpet felt like a boat's deck in weather. When James finally texted again, it was 3 words that turned my spine to ice. "She filed already." "Filed what?" "Divorce, restraining order, asset claims." A woman who knows the law can end your life with paper and never raise her voice. The second text arrived before I could command the first to stop vibrating in my palm. Not divorce. Assignment. Assignment. The word pressed against some old legal pain in my mind until it cracked. Assignment of rights, assignment of shares, assignment of debt. She was signing to take something from me or put something on me. Either way, I had given her the stage on which to do it. She came home with the same face she had left with, calm as the inside of a church. She found me in the kitchen pretending to learn how to hold a knife. She kissed my neck. "I handled something," she said. I said nothing. She put on a record, the kind of nocturne that sounds like mercy. She cooked spaghetti that could have redeemed any man's last hour on earth. She poured wine we should have been saving for salvation or victory. She asked if I was sleeping. She asked if I wanted to take a walk. I said, "Who is D?" Her eyes did that small calculation again. "Damien," she said. "He runs a fund." Of course he does. He knows people who can help, people who keep their phones in bags, people who keep their mouths shut, she said, and the papers. "I signed an assignment," she said, "of debt, the mortgage on my studio. I moved it to a private lender with better terms. If we're going to hold, I need flexibility. We do not own her studio. She does." The mortgage had been a point of pride. I felt a sharp relief I did not trust. "Why didn't you tell me? I didn't want to add weight to your chest," she said, "and I used the foundation's contacts to improve the rate. The board will be proud." I wanted to believe. I also knew that people like Damien do not improve anything unless they can extract blood with interest. The room felt slanted. "And you didn't sign anything else?" She shook her head. "Just that." She showered. I called Noah from the pantry like a criminal within his own home. He ran a check with the speed of a man who has already imagined every species of betrayal. He called back with a voice the temperature of stone. "She did assign the mortgage," he said, "but she also filed notice of a new trust, not in her name, in yours, in mine. Revocable trust, silent trustee, purpose undisclosed." "What does that mean?" "It means someone set up a shield for you," he said. "If she did it, she is either an angel or she is building a corral around you to drive you where she wants." The next morning the papers hardened. The board threatened to remove me. The banks called in covenants I had forged myself and buried in contracts so deep you could hear heat dying. The rumor in the clubs was that I had a stroke on a jet. The rumor on the sidewalk was worse. Men I had helped when their first venture died shrank when they saw me. I became the parable that fathers tell their ambitious sons. Do not end like him. Arya did not ask for a new ring. She did not demand travel or tears. She did, however, begin to move with a schedule that did not include me. She woke earlier. She stayed out later. She took calls on the terrace in a voice that ran low across the water. She returned with clothes I hadn't seen before, sharp, nearly severe, the wardrobe of a woman who had decided to stop asking permission to be taken seriously. She was building something. Whether it was a future with me or a future from me, I could not tell. On the third day, James sent a photo from a long lens that punched through the block glass of a conference room. Arya with Damien, and another man I recognized with a disgust that felt like heartbreak's older brother, my CFO. Priya had run my numbers since the crash of 2008. I trusted her more than I trusted my own pulse. In the photo, she was leaning toward Arya like a mother teaching a daughter how to not drown gracefully. I went to the Oriole. They took my phone and handed me a burlap sack for my self-respect. I walked into the dark and found the booth by the temperature change in the air. Arya looked up, surprise spiking, then vanishing, the professional's mask sliding back into place. Damien smiled like a knife. "Elias," Arya said, "you shouldn't be here." "It appears I am everywhere I shouldn't be," I said, and turned to Priya. "You too." She looked pained. "I came to protect you." "How?" "By intercepting a coup," she said, and nodded at Damien. "He's the coup." Damien spread his hands. "I'm merely a humble lender." "You're a thief with paperwork," Priya said. Arya stood. "Elias," she said, and the gravity in my name stopped me. "Listen to me. You built a story that can kill you. There are sharks in that water, but I am not one of them. If you want to survive your own play, come with me now." "Where?" "To meet a journalist," she said, "and then to sign something I should never have to sign." "What?" "She thinks you lost your fortune," Damien said, amused. "She's about to lose hers." Arya did not look at him. She looked at me. "Do you trust me?" she asked. "Trust is a simple word that requires an ocean." I nodded. She took my hand under the table, squeezed once like a code, and led me out. We rode the freight elevator to the alley, into sun so honest it stung. She put me in the sedan and gave the driver an address I did not recognize. As the city slid by, she spoke without looking at me. "You wanted to see who I am when the house is on fire," she said. "You're about to see it, and I hope you are man enough to live with what you learn." We arrived at a newsroom with old floors that had listened to generations of lies. In a glass conference room, Arya laid a folder on the table and looked at a woman whose eyes said she had loved and lost too many stories. "This is a recording," Arya said. "It proves that a lender named Damien Kell colluded with a member of my husband's board to fabricate a liquidity crisis and force a sale. I'm going to give you this in exchange for one thing: protection for my husband's employees. You will write the truth, but not until their paychecks are guaranteed by the city fund." "I have those papers ready." The woman stared. "And why would you do this?" "Because I don't marry men for their money," Arya said. "I marry them because I can stand in the same room with their souls." I should have felt pierced by the tenderness of it. Instead, I felt the ground move and wondered how deep my pride had dug my grave. Arya signed. She transferred. She surrendered. She set terms. She turned to me and said, "We are not done. There is one more thing to do." "What?" She pulled a slim envelope from her bag and slid it across the table. I knew the look of that kind of paper. It was a petition. She had filled in her name. She had left one line blank. "Divorce," I whispered. "For show," she said. "If you sign this now, we will break the coup. They will think I am leaving and that I will settle for quick cash. Meanwhile, the trust I set up in your name will seal your core assets from any emergency sale. We'll undo it all in a month. But we need the predators close and hungry to be caught." "You planned this," I said. "I learned to plan from you," she said. I looked at the line. I looked at the woman I had married because she made me remember I had not always been made of iron. The pen in my hand felt heavier than any anchor. I thought of the morning she closed the curtain and said we would be fine. I thought of the night I stood over her sleeping and measured the distance between love and fear with the width of my palm. I thought of all the ways a man can be wrong about the person who shares his bed. I signed. The city outside kept breathing. The river kept running. The newsroom began to hum as the machine of truth warmed. Arya exhaled finally, and the sound of it was a door unlocking in a house I thought I had lost. I took her hand. She let me hold it. Then her phone vibrated with the kind of message no one expects to receive in a lifetime, and the pounds of paper we had just moved became feathers in a hurricane. She read once, twice. Her face emptied. She handed me the phone. It was a photo of my signature on a document I had never seen, a transfer of everything to the man trying to ruin me, dated 2 weeks ago, not forged. The notary was real. The witness was real. The signatures matched the curl of my own hand. The message under the photo was 4 words that detonated in the center of my chest. "You will not win." I had not signed it, but the paper said I had, and the notary was my son-in-law. The trap had caught something I could not name, but the worst was yet to come. The next hour cracked open like a fault line. I felt old in a way I had never allowed myself to feel. Not the age of bones, but the age of myth, the moment when the hero realizes he is not fighting the dragon at all. The dragon is inside the castle and wearing his ring. Arya's grip tightened on my hand. The journalist's phone began to ring as if the building itself had swallowed an alarm clock. "Who did this?" she asked. "My daughter's husband," I said, and the words tasted like seawater. "Patrick. I had rescued Patrick from bankruptcy when he courted my Catherine. He had worn gratitude like a suit that fit for a season and then went out of style. He had learned to drink with conviction and lose with grace and hide with genius. He had learned where I kept my documents. He had learned how to imitate, not the flourish of my signature, but the rhythm of my errors. The kind of forgery you can't see unless you know that I always cross my T before I dot my I, the way my father taught me when I was 8 and the world still smelled like oil and pine tar. Arya moved first. "We need to move to the courthouse," she said. "We need to file a contestation and put a hold on any transfers related to that document, now." The journalist stood. "My editor will clear a special," she said, "but I need confirmation that the hold is in place before we go to print. If we publish and the money moves before the city acts, you'll be right but ruined." We ran. The sedan flew like a prayer. The city looked new and hostile, the way a familiar room looks when the power goes out. Priya met us on the marble steps with a folder that turned my stomach. "He's been building this a year," she said. "Small authorizations, routine signatures. He learned your hand while you were generous enough to let him hold your pen. I think Catherine does not know." Inside, the hallways smelled like paper and fear. We filed, we swore, we stood before a judge whose hair was the color of dawn and whose eyes suggested she had become this person because the world needed at least one adult in it. She read. She asked questions that embarrassed me with their simplicity. "Why would your son-in-law do this? Why now?" I said the true thing. "Because I made room for him to believe he could." She granted the hold. She signed with a flourish that felt like a hand on my back. We were not safe, but we were not drowning for the next 24 hours. The machine of the newsroom clanked into speed. The city fund called and asked for the payroll numbers of any staff who might suffer. Arya produced them. Priya had already printed them. The world was, for a moment, a place where competence might matter. Then Catherine arrived. She moved through the line of chairs like a storm. She looked from me to Arya, to the judge, to the papers, and then back to me, and it was as if I were back on a deck in heavy weather, waiting for the wave that decides if you live or learn to breathe water. "What did you do?" she asked. "I tried to protect you," I said, "by staging your own fall, by suspecting your wife, by giving my husband the space to destroy us. I did not give him that space. You built a palace of it," she said, and her voice cracked once and then steadied, "and you never asked me if I was happy inside. I thought." "That's the point," she said. "You thought. You did not ask." Her anger was earned. The judge cleared her throat. "We can litigate feelings later," she said gently. "Right now we need to track the path that paper tried to take. Counsel, subpoena the notary. Bring Patrick in." We waited with the kind of patience that is less virtue than exhaustion. Patrick arrived wearing a suit the color of spite and a face arranged for innocence. He took the stand and swore in a voice that tried to convince the air it was honest. He said he had witnessed me sign the transfer. He said I had been fully aware. He said I had thanked him. He told the story with the confidence of a man who has practiced in the shower and in the mirror and in a car that cost more than a teacher will make in 3 years. Arya watched him with the focus she uses when a piece is about to pivot. When the judge finished her first round, Arya asked to speak. She is not a lawyer. She is a musician and a woman who has watched men lie for a living. The judge allowed her. "Patrick," she said, and her voice was the kind you use to teach a child his first song. "Your story is perfect. Too perfect. The problem with perfect is that it forgets life." When Elias signs under stress, his hand drifts a hair to the right of the line, at the last third of his name. When he signs in calm, it drifts left. You say he signed in my kitchen on a Sunday morning while I was at church. Sunday morning is the only time he is fully calm. The drift should be left. In the document it is right. He blinked. "That's absurd." "It is anatomy," she said. "And you know it because you have watched him sign more times than my husband realizes." Priya stood. "I can corroborate. I have kept copies, with drift notes, because I know this man." The judge leaned forward. "Bring me the copies." Priya did. The drift was there, subtle as a tremor, undeniable. The room shifted. Patrick's face recalculated and chose a new lie. "I must have misremembered the time." Arya did not let go. "No, you remembered the time that suited you, and you forgot the one that saves you. There is a camera in our kitchen that Elias installed when he thought raccoons were getting into the pantry. He forgot about it. I did not. If you signed him on a Sunday, you are on that camera." Patrick blanched. Silence took the room by the throat. The judge looked at me. "Is there such a camera?" "There is," I said, and shame burned the back of my neck. Not because of the camera, but because my wife had just saved me with a thing I had installed to surveil something smaller and meaner than the person I had become. We watched the footage together. Strangers packed into a room that smelled like dust and a century of truth. The Sunday in question played in my kitchen like a home movie from a house whose occupants had not yet learned how to be wary. I was there in my robe, burning toast. Arya came in and kissed me, same as always. Catherine called from the garden. Patrick arrived with a box of pastries and a face you could hang a painting on. We laughed at something Arya said about the gulls. There was no signing. There was no paper. There was only the life I had chosen, and then chosen to doubt. The judge dismissed Patrick with a promise that made his lawyer swallow. The hold became an injunction. The journalist's editor greenlit the story. Damien Kell's name began to trend on screens he cannot afford to hide behind. The board, half of whom had already drafted statements about their sadness, reversed themselves with the speed only cowards know. The bank stopped calling. The phones stopped ringing. The house, for the first time in days, fell quiet in the way a sanctuary does after real worship. That night, back at our kitchen table, under a curtain still closed against a city that has not yet decided if you are a cautionary tale or a song it will dance to again, Arya set 2 plates and poured tea. She looked at me long enough for my soul to stop pretending it had not been caught red-handed. "You lied to me to find the truth," she said. "You almost lost it, I know. You tested me because you were afraid," she said. "You found what you were looking for, and you also found what you did not expect." "What is that?" "That I am stronger than you thought," she said, "and that your pride is more fragile than you allow." I reached for her hand. She let me hold it. "I am sorry," I said. "I do not know how to be more sorry than I am." "You will learn," she said, "if you want to stay married." "I do." "Then there is one thing left to do." "What?" "Tell them the truth," she said, and tilted her head toward the camera in the corner. "Tell the people you asked to listen that you are the villain of your own story and the student of its lesson. Tell them before I decide that the divorce papers should be more than theater." I turned to the camera and felt old and found and newly made, all at once. The story's crescendo had come and gone. The echo was where the meaning lived. I opened my mouth to begin the repentance and the repair, but the worst was yet to come. The worst was simple. It was not a bank run or a hostile board or a forged signature. It was the quiet knowledge that I had taught the person I loved to prepare for my storms. Arya had built a plan to save me because she knew I would someday try to drown us both. That was the shape of the truth I had hunted. It was not about gold or gowns or youth. It was about the weather inside my chest. We unwound the theater with the same precision that built it. The journalist published the investigation. The city fund backed the payroll while the injunction held. The board voted to reinstate me, and I declined the chair, recommending Priya instead. I resigned from 2 charities I had infected with my vanity and gave anonymously to the school that had introduced me to the woman I did not deserve. Damien was indicted. Patrick took a plea when the notary flipped. Catherine moved home to the guest cottage for a month and made me learn how to make the coffee I drink. She made me say the words fathers rarely say to daughters and mean them. "I love you." I was wrong. I forgot to ask. Arya asked for something I did not expect. Not a new ring. Not an apology party. She asked for a year without the staff we had relied on to keep us from each other. She said, "If we are going to stay, we will cook, we will sweep, we will fix the way we look at mornings." She asked for Sundays with no phones and a practice room with a lock only she controlled. She asked me to sit in the second row when she played and to stop trying to run the tempo with my jaw. We rebuilt slowly enough to notice. I learned the names of the people we funded and the streets they walk. She learned the names of the men I lost in the storms of my 20s and why I still dream of their mothers. I learned to tell her when a ghost grabs my throat. She learned to tell me when my silence sounds like a verdict. We found a therapist who runs sessions like sound checks and refuses to let a man like me win by eloquence. I bled pride on that rug, like a man finally old enough to be new. When the injunction became a judgment and the judgment became a line in a book no one reads for pleasure, I went back to the river. The gulls were laughing again, but it felt like blessing now. Arya came to stand beside me. We watched a ship slide out, stacked with containers the color of childhood. She took my hand. "Do you still want to know my true face?" she asked. "I do," I said, "but I want to learn it without a war." "Good," she said, "because it changes. And I want to meet yours as it does. If you stayed with me through this storm, if you have ever wondered what love looks like without its costume, subscribe now and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Tell me what you learned, and tell me who you intend to love better after hearing how I almost lost my chance to do the same. Stories work when they leave dents that guide our hands. The lesson is not clever. It does not glitter. It is the shape of a ship that knows its harbor. Pride pretends to be iron. Love is. Choose the iron that bends to shelter. Choose the truth before you force it to fight back. In the end, the fortune I pretended to lose showed me the wealth I had been spending like air. I intend to keep it, and this time I intend to keep it by telling the truth at the beginning, not at the end.